We call this the International Congress on Language Learning. It's a congress more than a conference. The difference being, if you go to a conference, you may be going for you. If you're going to a congress, you are a delegate. You're representing somebody else. You're not just here for you. You're here for your team or the people who sent you or whatever. So there's a sense of responsibility to report back. So we like to have that term, Congress, because you're a delegate coming here, representing a group of people. In our program, pilot program, too, we really want to push. We don't want to be satisfied with what we're doing. Remember Socrates? I don't know that was before your time. Yeah. What was Socrates noted for? Asking questions. Questions. What was the second thing he was noted for? When he would ask questions, he would create doubt. And, of course, he'd go to the extreme, push people into corners and doubt, and you kind of got stymied. But when we get into our particular fields, we should keep asking questions and doubting that we've got the full answer yet. That's why I've been with MTI since 1971. We started the pilot program in 75, and there's still horizon out there, still things about language that we haven't discovered. And I tell my pilot team, I say, if we don't discover that, somebody else will. And I hope they do, so they can share back with us. And in our program, we have 5 premises that our program is built on, and there must be a 6th premise. There must be. And you got to question that. If you think you already have all the answers and it's all solved, you will stagnate. You will stagnate. So, have this sense of freshness there. And we're still getting ready to get into the session this morning, but I read this last night. I just kind of felt compelled to read it to you. Psalm 92. It is good to praise the Lord and make music to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your love in the morning and your faithfulness at night, to the music of the 10-stringed lyre and the melody of the harp, or the 88 keys. For you make me glad by your deeds, O Lord. I sing for joy at the works of your hands. How great are your works, O Lord! How profound your thoughts! The senseless man does not know. Fools do not understand that though the wicked spring up like grass and all evildoers flourish, they will be forever destroyed. But you, O Lord, are exalted forever. For surely your enemies, O Lord, surely your enemies will perish. All evildoers will be scattered. You have exalted my horn like that of a wild ox. Fine oils have been poured upon me. My eyes have seen the defeat of my adversaries. My ears have heard the rout of my wicked foes. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green, proclaiming, the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no wickedness in him. Thank the Lord for his word and his work and his enabling grace. Father, we thank you for this psalm and David's reflection. Thank you for your work in our lives. I pray that you would continue to guide us as we meet together, that this time together, if it please you, will be beyond all of our expectations. That you will do a deep work in us, that you would give us opportunity to share one-on-one of heart concerns and to listen to others as well. Bless this time, we ask, we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Now, you have a handout, and I basically want to read through this. And after hearing Steve this morning and seeing all those things, I thought, uh-oh. The role of the team leader in team language learning. But maybe we should change that word. I want to change it to maybe point person. Point person. We're all servants, of course, but there is the point person. And a place where really the buck does stop. And we have to realize that. So, we can't go to either extreme here. And all of us have probably in our heads what a leader is all about. And I think we need to be kind of disabused of some of that concept, and Steve is helping us there. But there still is the point person. And so maybe this is just old hat to you, but I would like you to think in terms, well, maybe these are some guidelines, some ideas, some different way of putting it maybe. So as we go through, you may want to star something or put a question mark on something, or you say, I want to emphasize this to myself later, or I totally disagree with this, so you can X that out, or however you want to do that. And, of course, much of this has been said before, but if it causes you to think or clarify something, then thank the Lord for that, and you can start it. So, as we get into this then, I'll make a few comments maybe along the way. But straight is the gate, and narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. And few there be who are willing to go through the straight gate and narrow way, the arduous, time-consuming route that leads to fulfilling life and service in another culture. That straight gate, narrow way includes language learning. Strong leadership is crucial to sustaining the perseverance that's required. And somebody has to be that point person. Maybe it's you, maybe it's somebody else in your field. Maybe that person didn't even aspire to this. They just were appointed. Several years ago, there was an expat physician who went through pilot, and he wrote back to me and said he realized if we don't learn the language, our circle of friends and opportunities for ministry will be markedly limited. And I don't want to be forever chained to an interpreter, whether in the hospital or in the churches. I like the word chained. I don't want to be chained to an interpreter. So personal commitment is strategic here. The sense of ownership. If it's going to happen, I've got to make it happen. I depend on all the outsourcing, but in the last analysis, I'm the one that does this. So, here's 5 key responsibilities for the point person. got to take it on. Somebody has to take it on. And I suggest there are 5. Number 1, clarify 3 important points related to the mission of the team. Early on, even at the recruiting stage, before a commitment is made, team members should understand clearly what their mission is, where it will be carried out, and what it will require. This enables the team to go into the mission with eyes wide open. Clarity and challenge at the beginning establish important talking points later as well. And the leader, point person, takes on this responsibility and doesn't relinquish it. Tendency may be, well, let somebody else do this. No, I think it's the point person's responsibility. So, clarify the mission itself. Proactive talking points, the example could be, we've been entrusted with a particular mission to accomplish in response to a call and with the sacrificial support of people counting on us. We're not out there. We're there representing others and, of course, our Lord. So the leader, point person, spells this out in detail, what the mission of the particular is of that particular team. I think somebody has to be aware of that and point that out. And there is a powerful, crafty enemy opposing us. And we can get easily sidetracked, easily deceived. So the implications, we recognize that we submit to, depend on the one who said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And so with that realization, we proceed. Clarity on the mission itself is strategic. Clarity on where the mission will be carried out and what the implications are. Proactive talking points. Our mission will be carried out with people created in the image of God who are functioning within a specific language and culture. And it's the leader, the point person, who specifies this in detail. And the implications are, this means we get on their wavelength. We get into their conceptual field. We do not expect them to move into our world so we can communicate with them. We move into theirs. We get on their language's meaning base. I think that's maybe the most important, is their meaning base, their conceptual field. When they talk, what do their words mean? We must not get sidetracked from this aspect of our mission. And the Apostle Paul is a good example. He said, I make myself a slave to everyone. Slave, I limit, confine, restrict myself to their worldview and their cultural frame of reference. Clarify, then, where the mission will be carried out. And then clarify what's required to be involved in the mission. Some proactive talking points here may be, this mission is not for the faint of heart. It will require self-denial, self-discipline, self-sacrifice, so as to learn their language well and get into their world and life view. So the implications, because of the nature of the mission and the forces opposed to it, these qualities cannot be merely self-maintained. They can only be sustained through our submission to and dependence upon the one who is at work within us, the one who is ultimately in charge of the mission. This is God's enterprise, not ours. And He's called us to join Him in it, and we do so wholeheartedly. Following up on Paul again, 1 Corinthians 9 says, I beat my body, my lifestyle, my schedule, and make it my slave, so that after I have preached the gospel, I myself will not be disqualified. That is an attrition casualty. So Paul says, I make myself a slave to all. I make my body a slave to me. Very important for the cross-cultural worker. And Jesus called and chose his team, and they followed him without knowing what was entailed. And often we don't know what's entailed either, but can we somehow get close and clarify a few things for our team? Yeah. See, clarifying these 3 points ahead of time, I think, is so important. Each individual then will understand the nature of the mission before committing to it, rather than join the mission and then find out later what it's all about. Now, Jesus' team, they joined him without realizing what it was all about, but he was their leader. He was their master. So how close can we get to helping people understand what really is involved? It's the leader's role to communicate this as clearly as possible, and not just once. The point person persists in keeping the team focused on the mission, its purposes, goals, requirements, particularly in times of stress and struggle. Proactive talking points such as these lay a foundation so that when team issues arise later, they can be more effectively dealt with. In fact, if you do your team a disservice if you don't inform them of what's at stake in the mission. And if there is any hesitation or hint of unwillingness on their part to accept the challenge, maybe it's best not to proceed. But sometimes in missions, we'll take anybody who's willing to go. And sometimes those of us on the field sometimes wonder, how did you slip through the cracks? Who was looking the other way when it came to accepting you? How in the world? So we have that. So we have that we need to contend with as well. So, clarification, strategic. And then the second, as the team leader, the point person, to be convinced and then convince the team that language learning is a necessity. I think this is a very, very strategic point. Now, it is true, not every cross-cultural ministry situation requires learning the language. But where it does, the leader, the point person, must be absolutely convinced of that fact and not waver on it. It's not enough that some team members consider it to be important to learn language. It is first and foremost the responsibility of the point person to be convinced of its necessity, clear on its requirement, and then to champion its cause and not back down on it. Delegating or allowing this cause to another team member, or merely acquiescing in a cause that another team member may be trying to promote, just won't cut it. The leader may not be the champion language learner, but he must champion the cause of language learning. Point person may not set the pace in learning the language, but he does set the tone. I think that's strategic. The buck has got to stop somewhere, and I think it's the point person's responsibility. This is the role of the leader. Then the third thing, empower the team to learn the language well. Somebody has to take that responsibility. So, 3 essentials. Ensure that pre-field training is provided, that the optimal on-field learning location is secured, and that the time is not just promised but guaranteed for the team to learn the language. Carrying out these essentials might best be turned over to a skilled language coach that the leader has carefully selected, but the buck still stops with the leader, especially when issues or crises arrive in relation to these essentials. So the first thing, pre-field training. Now, all of us will say, yes, got to have that. Language learning is potentially one of the most difficult and humiliating experiences that adults will engage in. There's a grad student that I heard once. He was finishing his language requirements, but still was in college getting his degree, and his comment was, "I still get nauseated every time I walk by the language arts building on my way to another class." Difficult time it was. Of course, adults have certain perceptions of themselves as language learners, much of it based on previous attempts to learn another language. Adults also have preconceived ideas about how language should be learned. Their definition of the task, accurate or inaccurate, will strongly affect how they will go about learning it. Hence the need and value for pre-field training. See, definition determines direction. Theory informs practice. And all of us have definition and theory in our heads, and then it works out in certain ways. Hopefully, pre-field training will help this, because nobody comes clean-slated. We've all had experiences, and for many North Americans, it hasn't been a good experience. So, good pre-field training, language acquisition skills training, places learners on a new platform from which to launch into language learning. It provides a big picture view of the nature of the task. That is, what is this task all about, and how should I go about attacking it? It develops skills crucial to learning language well, including ear sensitivity, mouth flexibility, known as phonetics training. It gives learners a toolkit loaded with projects and activities to use in a wide variety of language learning contexts. It provides successful language learning experiences that then bolster confidence. It helps adults realize this is a doable task after all, because language is basically a human ability. We have taken it out of the human category and put it in the academic category, but adults are still human, and you can learn language. So the successful experiences provide confidence, and then it emphasizes a personal sense of responsibility, ownership, entrepreneurship. If it's going to get done, I've got to do it. But I'm going to language school. I'm hiring a tutor. By the way, we tell people in Pilot, if you have a language school to go to and you do not avail yourself of that opportunity, you are depriving yourself of one of your best options, one of your best opportunities. So do it. Now, the question then is, why should anyone be deprived of a resource like this and be forced rather to go into language learning with blinders on? You haven't seen the whole picture. You only have your past personal experiences. Training of this sort, of course, takes time, requires a process for it to take hold so that it will have long-range effect. And there is no way this can be accomplished in 2 or 3 afternoon sessions at the agency's candidate orientation, along with everything else that's going on. When will we ever learn? Agencies look for ways to cut down on time and expense. But in my opinion, and I hope yours, pre-field language skills training should not be on the nice but perhaps not really necessary list. In fact, this type of training has the potential of actually cutting down on the time needed to learn language. So which is more costly in the long run? The time and expense to prepare for language learning, or the tremendously costly attrition due in great part to the lack of ability in language? If team leaders are proactive in seeing that their team gets properly trained, language learning issues later on will be or should be lessened. Now this next part I get from Martin Simons. Some of you know Martin, just retired, went back to England, I think. Did he go back yet? Or is he? Yeah, he's gone back. Excellent language facilitator, language coach, OMF. And I get this from him. Here's very important proactive suggestion. Field leaders themselves should strongly consider getting in touch with new recruits early on in order to personally convey the value and necessity for pre-field training, rather than leave this up to the home office to convey as a requirement. In fact, pre-field training should not be viewed as a requirement, but as a privilege accorded new workers so they arrive on the field empowered to learn. Training is not only a great necessity, but also a tremendous privilege. Leaders should not scrimp on the vital training, recognizing that their team members will be hamstrung if they arrive poorly equipped for the task, risking disastrous attrition consequences as a result. Now, who ever heard of deploying special forces to risky situations without adequate preparation? Why does the unthinkable sometimes happen, maybe often happen, in missions? So, pre-field training. Now, on-field language learning. The leader makes sure that new team members have the best language learning situation available, managed perhaps by a language coach. See, the leader doesn't take on everything. There's delegation that takes place. The best situation may actually be in a location other than where they will serve, even in another country. This enables them to concentrate full-time with minimal distractions on learning the language. But if formal training is not available, the language coach seeks out a community living situation best suited for self-directed learning and interaction with native speakers. Of course, this will require much searching, not just for the best places to reside, including the possibility of staying with a national family, but for the best location where community interaction, integration, friendships, language learning, and practice are most likely to occur. And I think as much as possible, the coach should set this all up for them and then act as the midwife to bonding with the local people, introducing newcomers to neighbors and local merchants. I think Tom and Betty Sue's thing on bonding, that was excellent. Tom was, I think, a prophet in this. Betty Sue is here somewhere. Yeah, all of us, those of us that knew Tom and Betty Sue were influenced by this. But Tom put things in the extreme. And I think it's okay to put things in the extreme for clarity, as long as it's extreme in the right direction, and extreme causing you to think and inquire. And that's what Tom and Betty Sue did for us. And provide and guarantee the time necessary. This is a biggie and often falls through the cracks. The leader makes sure that the time required to learn the language will be provided. The language coach then guards this time. This cannot be overemphasized. Time and again we hear of long-term workers who come from pre-field language acquisition skills training, all primed for language learning, and then are not provided the time necessary to do it because of other pressing issues. The result is the oft-repeated statement, "I wish I would have had more time to learn the language. Not getting it adversely affected my ministry." And if attrition occurs, who knows to what degree this was a major factor, that they didn't get the language. Under the authority of the point person, leader, the language coach becomes the advocate for new learners and does not leave this up to them, that is, the learners, to fight their own battle for the time they need. How many times have people been siphoned off when they're primed and all ready to go? So, empower. Third, mentor learners through the language learning process, much of it through an empowered language coach. Mentoring should not be encouragement-focused, should be encouragement-focused more than requirement-focused. Encouragement nurtures challenge, personal responsibility, and ownership. Requirement, though at times necessary, could spark chafing, resisting, knuckling under, etc. Oh, now, here are a bunch of points here in the mentoring. Proactive mentoring reminds learners that language learning is their ministry responsibility right now. They've been given the time and must, with discipline and without distraction, use it to the full. Now, this all here may be ideal. Hopefully it's not idealistic. But if we say, okay, this is a model, this is what we should shoot for, this is the ideal, then we at least got something to go by. We're just not out on trying to figure out, well, what are the real things that should be done here. So treat it that way. You might say, well, that's extreme. But hopefully it's extreme in the right direction and causes you to think and ponder about this. Proactive mentoring in the thick of language learning continues to focus on the talking points way back at the beginning. The mission we're engaged in, the commitments we've made to get people on those people's wavelength, and the necessity for disciplined lifestyle, that is, paring down life to the bare essentials during language learning. And mentoring does not mean hand-holding or making a lot of concessions. In fact, raising the bar with challenges to persevere brings out the best in people, particularly in their submission to the Lord as they continue to follow Him in this endeavor. Proactive mentoring heads off lifestyle issues that hinder language learning. Much of the fatigue and stress during language learning may be due to an undisciplined lifestyle. For example, poor study habits, procrastination, getting distracted, isolation from people, excessive escapes to Facebook. Okay, that's proactive mentoring. Proactive mentoring fosters qualities helpful to good language learning, like self-initiative, patience, persistence, openness to new ideas, willingness to risk using the language, willingness to make lots of mistakes. In fact, the Kenyan pastor said this to a new language learner: make as many mistakes as you can. In Pilot, we say, you have to make at least 1 million mistakes in the process of learning another language. So get going. If I got to make 1 million, well, I better get started. And actually, some mistakes, when you realize what actually came across that maybe was offensive, some mistakes can count for 1,000 or at least 500. See, and then you can get to 1 million faster that way. And all of us have wow, did I ever put my foot in my mouth when I said that? Or I didn't realize the meaning that they put on that. In Vietnamese, for instance, the word give is the word jaw. And that's normal word is jaw. But jaw is used by the person often who is requesting something rather than by the person who gives something. If I ask you to give me something, I will say, xin cho tôi, please give me. Well, if I'm asking you to give me something, am I putting you on a higher plane, the same plane, or a lower plane than I'm on? Depends on the culture. If I'm at, well, this is Vietnamese culture. Cho, there's hierarchy there. You have it, I don't. Xin cho tôi, please give me. Now, you see, in the English-Vietnamese dictionary, the first word you encounter, give English. First word is jaw, then there's other words. And I thought, well, those are just synonyms, right? One word's enough. Let's go with that one. We'll pick up the others later. that I didn't realize this. If I give you something and I use this word, jaw, I'm treating you like a beggar. You're a beggar. I have it, you don't. I will jaw it to you, you beggar. And we had some clothes that we didn't need, and I knew the neighbor could use them, and I didn't know the meaning of this word yet. Narrow meaning. I took the clothes over, and I said, I want to give you these clothes. And his face fell. He was sheepish. And then realized, oh yeah, in Asia you have to say it 3 times. Right? Now, and here I was stiff-arming him, treating him like a beggar, not even knowing it. Of course, people are very forgiving most of the time. But that mistake counted for 1,000, I think. So, that does happen. So, make as many mistakes as you can. Okay, now, I'm going to enter another thing here. Side point. I don't know if you remember way back in one of my emails, I asked you to try to find out what the Nationals said, the old people, what they said about the old missionaries and what they said about the new missionaries. I don't know, and I think I got maybe 1 or 2 who said, well, if I have time, I'll inquire about that. What was characteristic of the old missionary? That is pre-1970. The short-term missionary movement started about 1970. The old missionaries, wow, they'd be really old now. But if you find anybody, what characterized them and the new missionaries? What I heard also from Kenya, this came from Ken Harder, who some of you may know. He said, he asked a Kenyan pastor, and thought a minute, and he said, the old missionaries, they would walk with us. They would talk with us. They would come over. Seems like they had time for us. The new missionaries, what they want to do is work with us. Shoulder to shoulder, let's get to work. Because maybe I'm not here that long, and I've got some skills and ability. I want to work with you. The older missionaries, they would walk with us. They would talk with us. They would come over. They would spend time. The new missionaries, they want to work with us. And we appreciate that too. But can we have a little bit of both, maybe? There. So put that in your notebook, your pipe, and smoke it. Okay, number E here. Proactive mentoring sparks synergy within the whole team. A sense that we're in this together, supporting and praying for one another and watching out for each other, recognizing the complexity of this with team members in different locations and new members being added to the team. And then F, responsive mentoring provides the closeness of care and support, shepherding when discouragement and other crises arise during language learning. Now, those of you who are in the actual language learning coaching time, hopefully these will might give you some new ideas or spark or say yes, or wow, there's more than this. G, proactive mentoring encourages breadth in language learning activities. Learn is involved in a wide variety of learning projects, activities, community contacts, recognizing that a too narrow focus in language learning more quickly results in discouragement, in getting stuck on a plateau. And one of our mantras during the pilot program is multi-entry, multi-project, multi-sensory. in language learning is better. Breadth of learning activities. And then proactive mentoring makes sure that learners get strategic breaks during language learning. There's something about the mind that benefits from a break. In fact, the lack of strategic breaks may actually impede language learning. Happens time and again. I remember a professor once who said he could remember content, but he couldn't remember authors' names. And he'd be lecturing along, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's a guy that wrote an article or a book about this." He said, "I can't remember his name right now, but when I get it, I'll tell." In the meantime, let me tell you what he said. He said, "His name, I'm going to give it to the boys downstairs." That was his term for his subconscious. He called them the boys downstairs. And he'd lecture along, and then all of a sudden he'd write, "Oh yeah, they boys downstairs. They went through the files, brought it up to me. Let me tell you his name now." So sometimes they would be late, it might be 2 o'clock in the morning when they finally bring his name up to me. But he said, boys downstairs, they never stop. They're working all the time, either filing or retrieving. I thought, that is excellent. So you need strategic breaks, because when you go on a break, the girls downstairs, the boys downstairs are still working. And if you've been away for a time, and this has happened over and over again, and maybe I have a witness here, you come back after a month, 6 weeks, you come back and you're processing things better. You're expressing yourself better. You say, wow. Why? Girls downstairs, boys downstairs, they kept working. And what they'd been saying about the last 2 months of language-focused, language learning, tutor, going after it. The boys then were screaming, "It's a mess down here. We need you to take a break so we can get caught up." See? Jesus said to his disciples, "Come apart for a while." The strategic nature of breaks, very, very crucial. And then proactive mentoring encourages learners to have continuing language learning projects during ministry after formal language learning is completed. Language coaches check in from time to time with people in ministry to encourage ongoing language learning projects. Now, number 5, model the essential qualities related to language learning. Maybe there is such a thing as a super mom, but there's no such thing as a super leader other than our Lord, who is the ideal model in everything. New language learners to the team should not be dissuaded from learning the language by the seemingly poor showing of the leader. Something unhealthy is going on more deeply in the team if team leaders sense no compunction to learn the language or continue in language learning because my leader didn't set a good example. It's unhealthy if team members expect the leader to set the pace or be the model in everything. Each team member should persist and sense responsibility and not be dependent on the leader. Each should bear his own burden. Bear one another's burdens, including the burdens of your leader. In actuality, the leader, point person, may not have aspired to be in leadership in the first place. Being placed there, he may have been prematurely pulled out of language learning. It is actually to the leader's credit if team members leapfrog over him in language learning ability, particularly if he's opening a new field for the agency. Good leaders in no way take that as being upstaged. In fact, they take delight in the fact that they have set up the structures, they've greased the skids, greased the wheels, so that the team can learn the language and serve more effectively there. On the other hand, a godly leader is a model of humility and transparency in the way he facilitates the success of the team. He may be the one who struggles the most with learning the language, but he should be the model of determination and perseverance, keeping at it little by little himself, and along with this, not neglecting the fostering of relationships with nationals. His example in this way speaks volumes. Now, last few minutes here, there are some potentially dissuading factors that team leaders, point people encounter. And maybe you've experienced these, you've sensed these, maybe not. But one dissuading thing is the existing in-country language learning climate. It is, or it is not expected that expats will learn the language here. There is an aura that already exists in every agency and among the collective agencies in every country regarding learning the language. When new expats arrive, they quickly sense this attitude, the aura, whether or not language learning is the thing we do here and what we expect of everybody who comes here. I remember a guy from Ghana. He was in charge of a language learning center there. And he said it was like pulling teeth here in Ghana to get people to learn language. Because the aura, the climate, the whole attitude is you can get along in English. And new people come and they get right into English. It's hard. And he said, I made a trip over to Zaire when it was Zaire. So I went over there and found everybody was learning either French, Lingala, or Swahili. Everybody was learning it. Come back to Ghana, nobody's learning these languages. And I came to the conclusion that when everybody, including the expats and the nationals, expect the new learner to learn the language, guess what happens? They do. But if it's not expected, often they don't. It's one of the dissuading factors. So, leaders strongly determine the attitude that everybody on the team will have toward learning the language. The degree to which team members think that language learning is important or not important, language learning is the thing we do here, really depends on the leaders. Leaders create and maybe need to recreate because an opposing climate exists in the country, that language learning climate that motivates the team to learn. The second is urgency. New workers are needed now. We can't wait for them to go through pre-field training and learn the language. The pressure to press new workers right into service is the tyranny and short-sightedness of the urgent. The attrition that may result, along with the resultant collateral damage that comes with it, is inexcusable. Will we ever learn? Now, leaders do recognize that at times there will be urgent situations that will require deviation from the norm. But reactions to urgent situations will not be the norm. Leaders keep the long view in mind and are rarely pressured by the so-called urgent. Quick fixes tend to boomerang and become problems down the road. The norm is we take the time and provide the time to learn the language. Number 3, I'm hustling to finish this. Delay language learning. Start your ministry right away and then learn the language later. If English-speaking expats hit stride with the nationals in relationship, in ministry, through English, it's very difficult to break stride and try to go back to learning the language, especially when the nationals have been accustomed to relating to these expats in English. Here's an important point. Moreover, if expat strategic influencers do not learn the language, the nationals who spend time with them and become truly impacted by them, the expats, may actually find themselves, as nationals, more drawn to and comfortable with these expats, and as a consequence, more distance from their own people and culture. Happens all the time, thus hindering the fulfillment of the ultimate goal, national leaders serving and influencing effectively in their own context without being drawn out of it. Leaders emphasize that long-lasting ministry influence comes from being one with the people, and that language learning is strategic to this. So, language learning and friendship making will be the first major assignment and will not be delayed. Team members must start there. Ideal? Yes. Extreme? Maybe, but extreme in the right direction. Sidetracked. Start your ministry with those in the country who readily relate to you, the expat. Expat teams who were planning to target a particular region or a particular minority group might easily get sidetracked into opportunities that open up with people considered to be on the fringe of society, those who have had considerable exposure to outsiders. There's nothing particularly wrong with this, but who will take the time and expend the energy to reach the core of the society? As someone has said, not just the westernized city dwellers, but also the traditional village folk. It will take strong commitment and patience and perseverance to reach the core. And language learning is absolutely essential to this. Now, the agency leaders need to recruit and challenge the few, the willing, the determined, the perseverant ones to reach the core. Almost sounds like the Marines here. And then make sure they get the perhaps extra training to prepare well for this, as well as the time, the context, the degree of facilitation, and the encouragement necessary for them to do it. As one future-focused on-field leader said, we are not focused on the short term, but are looking to how we can minister in such a way that in 50 years' time there will continue to be a healthy, flourishing church at the core of this language group. Extreme? Maybe. Extreme in the right direction. Concluding remarks. Language learning is incarnational, like a birthing experience into the realm of another culture. Getting squeezed out into that realm and restricted to the meaning base of its language may at first seem limiting, but it's actually liberating. As a Czech proverb says, learn another language, get a second soul. A new side of you emerges as you learn. The gate is straight, constricted. Initially, the way is narrow, it's confined, but it leads to life and incredible opportunities to be an ambassador of the Lord, of use to Him as He pleases in that context. Who is willing to accept the challenge and decisively lead the team to take that route?